Hello, everyone. This is Clint Beck from Federal Highway. Just doing a sound check here, and hopefully we're started and you can see my presentation. The chat pod is on the right. Most of you have been in this conference now 2 days, so if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to pop them in the chat pod or in the Q&A on the right, and we'll respond to you. Today's session is local agency asset management examples from Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And we've got a flavor of a bunch of different things. Pat Wright is going to talk mostly about his experience talking with several different local agencies and what they have available, and a little bit about a course that LTAP has put together for helping local agencies with asset management. Chris Savatico is going to talk about a project in Moorestown Township, New Jersey, an open space project where they inventoried all of their parks and used asset management to make that work. It was quite successful. And then Dave's going to follow up at the end with a talk about New Jersey Transit commuter rail roadway sign trailblazer system. So you can read their bios on the website for this section. It's down below. And on the website. So I'm not going to spend time going through everybody's bio. So thanks, Steve, for checking on the sound there. Appreciate that. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to our next presenter. I'm going to stop sharing, and then Pat's going to unmute his mic and he will start presenting.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Let me get the PowerPoint up here and started. So Clint, can everybody see that presentation introduction slide there?
I can see that slide.
All right, so I got about 25 minutes or so just to talk about some local asset management systems in Pennsylvania. As Clint said, my name is Patrick Wright. We're doing a course development for the PennDOT LTAP program, and as part of that, we went out and interviewed and surveyed a lot of communities around Pennsylvania. So I'm just going to present a little bit about that in this session, just what we found out there and what we're going to do moving forward related to local asset management systems. I have a picture up there of my most prized asset. That's my bike that I like to ride a lot, and I have my own little asset management system for that. As a good friend of mine told me many years ago, clean and lube are your bike's best friend. So that's my little personal asset management system. But what we'll talk about this afternoon is a little bit about the context of what we have in Pennsylvania from local road ownership. We'll talk about some of the local asset management examples that we've seen, and then we'll talk about some lessons learned and what we're going to try to do from LTAP's perspective with support from Federal Highway and PennDOT moving forward to really try to get a lot more local communities implementing asset management systems in Pennsylvania. So just a little bit about Pennsylvania itself. I know a lot of you are from Pennsylvania and know this. Some of you may not. I'm sure every state has its own little interesting aspects of how transportation systems are maintained and owned. Here in Pennsylvania, we have about 120,000 miles of road. And 2/3 of those are owned at the local level. The other third is maintained by PennDOT. So at that local level, that 80,000 miles of road we have there, that's distributed between 2,500 different municipalities of all kinds of different sizes, shapes, resources, availability, and things like that. So we have a really diverse group of agencies that we're trying to work with here within Pennsylvania. We have done some outreach, as I mentioned, in development of this course. We've actually done some webinars. We've actually done some what we call virtual drop-in sessions, and we've actually been collecting some information based on these. So they're not really scientific surveys on some of these things, but just responses from the folks we're kind of getting. And we'll ask simple questions to people that show up to our webinars. How many people have asset management? And it's kind of interesting. You get the responses there, and from talking with people, the most prominent answer that you can see there is sort of some asset management system. And what that kind of means is that we do have some municipalities that do have good resources and have invested money and time in developing a formal asset management system. We have some that have a variety of spreadsheets or paper or in their head type of asset management system, and some that absolutely have nothing around Pennsylvania. And when we ask them, for those that do have asset management systems, what do they use? And it's kind of interesting what you see. There's still a lot of folks out there, as you can see in this sample here. And when we combine all the surveys together, there's a lot of people just using simple spreadsheets and paper. About half the municipalities in Pennsylvania, that's what they're doing. And they use that as an effective tool to manage the roads, the bridges, their signs, or whatever aspects of assets they're managing. So it's kind of interesting, the full range of information that people are using out there, and how they're using it, and how they're kind of getting by, and how a lot of them are actually doing really well, and how a lot of them really don't have anything. And that's kind of what we found out on our surveys. This is a fictitious township, Eddy Township in Pennsylvania here, but this is representative of a lot. It might be a township that has maybe about 40 miles of road. They may have 2 or 3,000 residents in the township, and their asset management system is what their roadmaster carries in his head. When was the last road you paved? When was the last time you fixed that culvert? Where the signs are, or maybe he doesn't know because it's all in his head. And that's the only asset management system they have. So we have a lot of communities in Pennsylvania that's their asset management system, all in somebody's head. Then we can go to the other end of the spectrum, and we do have some communities that do have resources and have invested in asset management system. And I'll talk a little bit more about some details about North Londonderry Township, for example. But they went out and purchased a system that they use to track over 30 different assets, anything from manhole covers, like you see in the picture here, to park benches. As assets in their system. And so we can kind of go from those two extremes, or what's really represented throughout Pennsylvania. And North Londonderry, you can see they actually use their system on a daily basis. They have folks that run around with iPads when they inspect things and enter it in real time. So they've got a really advanced system. So we can go all the way from Eddy Township, that's all in somebody's head, to somebody who's really taken advantage of information, databases, GIS, and technology to track their assets. Just going to go over here in this next section and talk about a couple applications, just again as some examples of what folks are doing around Pennsylvania, just to give you an idea of the flavor of what's going on. The first example is a little borough, Geistown Borough, outside of Johnstown area in Pennsylvania. It's a borough of about 2,500 people. And in this situation, this was actually several years ago, a new roadmaster came into the borough. And as often happens in these situations, when the new guy comes in, the previous guy was the guy that was there for 42 years, had everything in his head, and we left, the database just left with him. So now the new guy comes in, and he's kind of looking around and saying, well, what do I have, where it's at, what condition it's in, and they don't really know. So he started to go through the different issues that they had in the townships. And one of the things that he realized is that their stop signs that they had throughout the borough were a lot of problems. We took one of our LTAP classes on traffic signs, and realized that we do have a federal requirement in the manual and uniform traffic control devices that you have to maintain minimum retroreflectivity for your signs. You have to have some sort of method to show you're doing that, and working towards taking care of your signs and meeting those minimum levels. So he thought, well, with all the things that I have to do, we have this mandate here that we need to meet. So I'm going to start taking care of his signs. So their first step of developing an asset management system was working on their signs. He was able to work with the county, and they were able to give him some GIS mapping, which he then printed out and identified where they had all their stop sign locations. So the first step was figuring out how many stop signs they had and where they were at. The next thing they needed to do was assess their condition. So again, they actually worked with the county that actually had a retro reflectometer. So they can go out and check these stop signs like the one you see in the picture. I don't know how many people would actually think that's a good stop sign or not, but that's actually in very poor condition. And it's unfortunate that you do see a stop sign like that out there. That's one of the ones that would definitely not meet the minimum requirements for retroreflectivity. You can see how faded and cracked it is. And that's what we want to try to get. It can be a big safety issue. So there's a good reason for doing this type of asset management system. So they did their inventory, they did an assessment, the next step he needed to develop was kind of a plan. So again, he just used pencil and paper and the mapping that was provided by the county, and he went through and identified the signs that were below the minimum levels, and which ones needed to be replaced. When you think about a borough of 2,500 people and the amount of money that they can spend on signs every year, it's not much. So they were targeting probably about 8 to 10 signs a year as their budget to replace their signs. So he would identify actually different sectors, and they would go into each of those sectors of a borough and replace all the signs that were below the minimum levels to bring them up to compliance. And they had basically about a 5-year plan to do that, spread over the time. And result is, as you can see here, is a nice shiny new retroreflective stop sign. So that's kind of one example on a very kind of low tech end of how people are doing asset management here in Pennsylvania. To go to the other end of the spectrum, I'm going to talk a little bit more about North Londonderry Township. Again, they went out and purchased the system, actually probably about 8 to 10 years ago now, and they actually use it every day. It's worked into their daily routine from the management level all the way down to the road crew, going around with their iPads and entering. They actually said they still only have one guy that actually will not do that. So they just merely give them other assignments, but they still have somebody that will refuse to use the technology. It's kind of interesting. But they actually have, you can see the full advantage, and people were talking about a lot of details of asset management and tracking life cycle cost and expected years to replacement and things. You could see that they're doing that here. You could see if you look closely that they're tracking when they have inspections, when their inspections happen. In order to make sure things are consistent, they actually have a guide that they train their personnel on. So when they go out to inspect the manhole, what they're supposed to inspect, what things are supposed to look like, they actually have the different guide there with the different names and terminology are for the manhole. They actually have pictures that show what a good condition is and a poor condition is. So hopefully, even though they may be sending a different person out each year to look at these different manholes, that they're getting pretty consistent results on what the inspection ratings are. So again, this is another example, and there are many communities around Pennsylvania that do have more resources. They do have a pretty elaborate asset management systems like this. So it's very unique that we go from people that have nothing to somebody that's taken full advantage of technology, software, and resources to really do a good job with managing their assets. Just moving forward from all the data we collected, as I mentioned, one of the things that was a goal from Federal Highway and PennDOT was to actually improve asset management at the local level in Pennsylvania. So, how are we taking this information that we gathered? How are we going to move forward to help folks out there? So, um, just even in selling asset management is important, and actually, talking to people why they should actually invest some time and do it. I know there's a lot of justification for it. People talk about a lot of presentations, but from the people we talk to at the local level, the biggest thing that they can come back to is better decision making, and that was the biggest benefit that they could identify. Local communities can have a decision: do they buy a new dump truck, or do they buy a new police cruiser? How do you make that choice? Which one is more important and more critical to buy at that time, based on the conditions of the asset and the needs and things like that? Do you buy a bunch of 10 stop signs, or do you buy 10 curve signs? All kinds of choices that they have to make at a very minor level compared to some of the bigger decisions and some of the presentations I've seen on the budgets for DOTs and billions of dollars and going around. We're not talking billions, we're talking thousands here. But it's the same process, it's the same thinking, and you can use the same tools to make those decisions, even though it's on a much smaller scale. But this is the biggest benefit. And when you think of things politically at the local level, if any of you have been involved in local government and going to planning commission meetings or council meetings or board of supervisors meetings and things like that, you can often see that sometimes decisions are not data driven. It's more pet projects, or I think this. And so to actually bring data into these decisions so they can make better decisions for the community, get better results for the public that lives in their community and all that, is a very important benefit of asset management. So some of the other things we discovered in interviewing and surveying folks around the state is that most folks did not really have any sort of plan. A lot of them just dived right into, oh yes, we should have asset management. Just kind of jumped into something because of a certain need at the time, whether it was related to their culverts or their roads or their bridges or their signs or whatever. They kind of just jumped into things, and that kind of relates to getting systems evolve over time, and with that might come certain limitations, or you can't expand or you can't do things. So there's some townships we talk to that have very robust asset management systems, but they're all stovepipes. They're all separate systems and they're not integrated, and that can create some inefficiencies there. Another big issue is the actual implementation of asset management, and then the day-to-day management of the asset management system is often underestimated. And again, we find people that may have spent a lot of time and money and purchased systems or even started to implement systems. Maybe they spent some money and had somebody come in and help them get something started, and then all the data is put in, and then coming back, and then they don't even have the staff time because Fred left or Jane left, and now they don't have anybody to even use the system, and it just sits there. It's surprising actually how many times that happened, and they actually did not think once they had the system how much effort it would take just to manage it and actually use it to get the benefits out of it. So a lot of times people were actually spending time and money and doing things part way, and then it just sits there. That was kind of a interesting thing, and to me that just goes back to planning, and that I think these local agencies could do a better job planning of how they're going to use the system, how much time they need to dedicate it to it, how many resources they need to dedicate to the system too. So this is some of the drawbacks in talking to people about that. And you can see at the top of the list, just maintaining the database. So it's not even necessarily getting the initial inventory or even the initial condition assessment. A lot of folks are having people either come in to do that or they're getting interns to do that. So they're getting the information in there, but just coming back and maintaining it is one of the biggest drawbacks. And then because they're not doing that, they're worried about the data in there, and then they're not even using the system to actually apply to the decision. So that's a big issue is making sure. And again, this comes back to maybe even right sizing, using that term. When you think about a small borough, they're using pen and paper, so there was a very low investment into that system, and it's easy for them to manage. A bigger community that has more resources and a fully staffed public works department like North Londonderry Township or some other big townships or cities, they can actually dedicate personnel to that system. But this is what we found is the biggest issue out there from the local perspective. Just another example, this is a township in Lancaster County. And again, this is one of those situations. Lee Zimmerman is the roadmaster there, came into the township about 15 years ago or so, and basically said there was nothing from the previous roadmaster, no knowledge database, nothing written down, anything. So he knew they needed to do something. And the first issue that came up is a big problem in their township was their stormwater system, just knowing where all their inlets and outfalls and things like that were, and what was connected to what, they had no idea. So they started with that, and then kind of systematically progressed through doing other things. One of the things that they did next was actually the signs, again, because they realized that there was that federal mandate that they had to meet for the signs. They went out and did an inventory of their signs. You could actually see, if you actually look at the background there, you can see when they did the inventory was 2008. And again, one of the things that they do with this is try to manage their signs on an expected life basis, which is one of the things that is compliant with the MUTCD for doing that. And just even a simple spreadsheet like you see here, not even having it in GIS, still allows them to search things by date, see how many signs he's got to replace each year, so he can go into the board of supervisors and make budget requests and things like that. Then the other thing he did most recently was actually use it for a tool for planning their snowplow routes. He said that they would get together at the beginning of a storm and stand in the garage and say, "Hey, will you take that truck? You go there. I'll take this truck. I'll go here." And then they would just go out and kind of randomly do it every time. And now they actually have plans. I remember when I first got this, one of the questions that was asked was, do they have a plan B? What happens if somebody gets stuck? What happens if some equipment fails and things like that? And actually, they don't have a plan B. They have a plan A. They don't have a plan B yet, but that's something that is a good advice to think about when you're talking about snow routes and snow plowing and things like that. But even just using it for simple tasks like this, I think is a good use of an asset management and GIS system here. So moving forward, what we're trying to do again is up the level and increase the level of asset management throughout Pennsylvania. We're developing a course which is actually going to pilot next month. If anybody is interested in taking that LTAP course, you can go check out our website. If you actually just type in pen.ltap in the Google or whatever search browser, that'll bring up the web page, and you can look right on the front page and it'll have a listing of upcoming courses. And we actually have a course coming up on November 10th that will last 4 hours. Talking all about how local communities in Pennsylvania can implement asset management. So that'll be actually our first time teaching that class. We'll have another offering later this year. And then actually after those two offerings, after we teach it a couple times, we'll kind of polish things up and have a class that's ready for delivery throughout next year. So we're encouraging also people. There's a lot of LTAP centers. There's actually 54 LTAP centers throughout the U.S. and its territories, and tribal centers too. And a lot of them have developed their own asset management resources. Actually, here in Pennsylvania, we actually have a sign inventory management system that is available on our website that anybody can download and use for free. It's a spreadsheet-based system. Has data inventory collection sheets. It has a little manual on how to use the spreadsheet, not how to use Excel necessarily, but how to use the spreadsheet we created. We also think there's a lot of information out there. I saw a presentation earlier today from one of the MPOs in Pennsylvania, Delaware Regional Valley Planning Commission, Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, DVRPC, and they're out there. They have a ton of mapping. They're actually collecting information on bridges and roads, and we know other MPOs and RPOs in Pennsylvania are doing that too. And I think some of the local communities don't even know that. That they can actually get some of that information and share it. So that's good. We do know that PennDOT actually has sign inventories for all their signs and all the state routes. And one of the things we have in Pennsylvania, that even though it's a state route, some of the signs are actually the responsibility of local communities. And some of the PennDOT districts are willing to share that information with the local community. So they can actually get a nice state route going through there and understand which signs they're responsible for and which signs PennDOT are responsible for. So there's some little information sharing that people can do that actually save a lot of time. We also think small steps. I think we've seen enough, and I kind of mentioned one of the lessons learned there before is that we've seen people just bite off a big chunk, and because they did that, they can't even kind of come to grips with the system. Don't have enough staff time to even kind of manage and utilize it. So we're really encouraging people to use small steps. And then there's a lot of advances of technology that you're seeing in a lot of these other presentations around here, using phones. A lot of different vendors have developed systems to go out and actually assess signs, assess sidewalks, ramps, pavements, and things like that. So there's a lot of technology out there that can really save time for a lot of these communities in simple tasks like the data collection or even updating data in the system. One of the big discussions that we think will be important for local communities is what to even include in the asset management plan. This is a basic question, and in talking to people, I heard this actually. This is from Lee from Earl Township in Lancaster County, and he said, "Simple question you need to ask you: What do you want to find out? What do you want to know about your roads, your bridges, your signs, whatever?" And start with kind of simple questions like that, and go through and figure out how you can find that information out best and develop your asset management system around these kind of simple questions. Um, we do want to try to help people with what they should do with a plan. We want them to think about a plan and go through who's going to be responsible for it, looking at the different opportunities and risks they have out there, how they're going to do condition ratings and levels of service and all that. They need to think about this again before they just kind of dive in. And of course, most people that we're dealing with at LTAP, when it comes down to who's going to do it, it's going to be the roadmaster. It's going to be the township secretary. It's going to be people that are pretty much responsible for everything already. They're going to, if anything's going to happen, they're going to have to do it to make sure it gets done. As far as the assets, this is just a little picture from Lemoyne Borough. And you could just take a look at this picture. And I just want you to everybody start looking at that and think about how many assets are in that picture that the borough is responsible for. And you think about it, there's actually a lot of little things. So you can start with some of the obvious things. Well, we got pavement, we've got curbs, we've got sidewalks, we've got pavement markings, we've got signs, we've got lighting, we got trees, and then you got things like park benches, and you got garbage cans, and you can kind of go and see there's a lot of little things that are owned out there that a lot of communities really have no idea of how many bits and pieces they do own, and then further on to that, what condition it is in and how it's being taken care of. So again, it's one of those things that you have to think about. And one of the things we want to do in our class is actually uh, help them go through an evaluation of what assets they should have in their system and kind of rate which ones. North Londonderry Township, one of the examples that they had in their system is they did have park benches. And then they had kiosks, and they realized early on in the system that they actually went too far. So they actually stopped collecting data on those assets to kind of focus on ones that they felt were a higher priority and that they had the resources to kind of take care of. I mentioned there are different tools from LTAP centers all around the country. Some of them are available for free. Some of them there might be some small fees associated with, but I think that's an important resource for local communities here in Pennsylvania to take advantage of some of these public domain tools. That they could use anything from spreadsheets to even looking at how to rate their roads at different levels. So there's a lot of information out there for folks to use to get started in asset management. And this is just one other example. This is actually Thornberry Township. It's actually an interesting township. They're a moderate-sized township. They have about 30 some miles of road, several thousand residents, but they actually do not have a public works department. They actually contract out all the maintenance of the roads. So their manager is basically their public works director and also their asset management systems person too. So she started with a basically simple spreadsheet just to try to keep track of over the years of how they were inspecting the roads. You can see different tabs for different years down there. You can see gaps. How they started out with every year, then they skipped a few years and skipped a few years, so didn't go out and inspect those years. But she basically would keep track in a spreadsheet of which roads that they inspected, which roads that they performed services on and treatments on, and which ones they resurfaced it, and basically put it in a spreadsheet. And that was good for her for about 10 years or so to track what was going on in her community. Since then, they actually upgraded to a GIS platform where they actually started with the pavement management system and put all the pavement in there. And then they just recently added signs. And you can see this is a screenshot of their sign management system. You can see the red stop signs and things there. So they just started getting the signs in. They actually, at the time that I interviewed her, she had not actually done an assessment of the signs yet. They actually develop a program for how they need to maintain and take care of the signs yet. But that's kind of a good example, I think, where they kind of started small, started with a simple spreadsheet, and then they're kind of evolving over time based on their needs and their resources and what they have available to kind of grow. So it's kind of an example of starting with a small step, doing it successfully, doing it with something that they can manage it, and then kind of growing to something that's a little bit more useful over time. And again, I mentioned a lot of communities can take advantage of technology. There's all kinds of systems out there, all kinds of different levels. There's some communities that have done this in a variety of different ways and purchased systems from vendors or hired consulting firms to come in and do inventories and assessments and develop plans for them and all that too. So there's all kinds of things available for local communities, again, depending on the resources and needs and the opportunities that they have out there. So thank you very much. I hope I'm close on time there, Clint.
Perfect.
We're looking pretty close.
Perfect.
So if, as I mentioned before, if you're interested in looking at some of our asset management or other classes, feel free to check our website out. We have a lot of other classes besides asset management. All of them are available free to local folks throughout Pennsylvania. Thank you very much.
All right, Pat, if you want to stop sharing and then mute yourself and your video, and we'll get Chris up next. And questions for anybody that has a question while Chris is getting set up, feel free to type them. We have one already in the Q&A. Pat will take a look at that one, and we'll try and address those at the end, and we'll also type the answers in the Q&A so we have them on file. So Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Can you hear me and see my slides?
I hear you. Your slides have not come up yet. We'll give that a second.
All right. Slides up?
No, sir. So maybe stop sharing and reshare. We've.
I see them on my end.
Okay, Dave, you're good.
It looked like it. Try that again, Chris.
All right, let's try it again. Share screen. Entire screen, share, and pull up the slides. You see the slide deck?
Yeah.
I do.
All right.
Looks good.
All right, I'm going to hop out and hop back in and refresh my browser because mine's locked up. That way I can follow along. All right.
Okay, but everybody
Thanks,
else
Chris.
can see fine?
Looks great, Chris.
All right, okay. Yeah, if there's going to be a screw up, I'm going to be the guy to do it. Well, hello. My name is Chris Silvatico, and I want to thank you for allowing me to present to you what I think was a very useful and a lot of fun presentation. It brought together a lot of groups who might otherwise might never have worked together, all with the intention of working together towards a common goal and fulfilling a need. I hope you'll find it as interesting as we did actually doing it, and maybe by the end of the presentation, you might go back to your own townships and think about doing it in your own towns. I should also note that this entire project from soup to nuts was done as a volunteer effort. So it was a zero cost to the township. Well, zero cost up until the point where at the end, they did have to purchase some GIS software so they could actually use the data once we've collected it. But everything else was zero cost. So a little personal background. When I'm not here presenting to you, I work at AECOM, and I'm responsible for managing GIS tasks for highways and bridge projects, as well as planning projects, permitting, and asset management efforts. But besides that, I also volunteer for 3 different groups. The first 2, Sustainable Moorestown and MEAC, will become evident a couple slides down. The third slide is important that I just want to quickly mention that MAGTUG, or the Mid-Atlantic Geospatial Transportation Users Group, is a group that puts on presentations very like the ones we're doing now. What we want to try to do is bring together professionals and have presentations where people can talk about what they do and to promote the field. There's actually a webinar tomorrow. We put on webinars because of COVID. We've been doing a lot of them. There's a webinar scheduled for tomorrow where we're going to discuss Nearmap and what Nearmap does and their products. So you can always go on to magtug.wordpress.com to get information about that. But anyway, besides that little 5-second plug, let's get into the presentation. For any of you that might not know where Moorestown is, this is a little map of the township of Moorestown with a little inset showing where it is in the world, essentially in New Jersey. A little outside of Philadelphia in Burlington County. Moorestown was established in 1682 and incorporated as a township in 1922. It's about 15 square miles and has a population of about 20,500 people. That was 2019 numbers. Now, the overarching organization where we actually teamed up with in order to do this program is called Sustainable Jersey. And what Sustainable Jersey does is it gets municipalities together and helps them become more sustainable. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, when I say sustainable, I don't mean just environmental issues. Let's think of sustainability like 3 interlocking rings, where environment is one of them. But we also have economic and social. And sustainability works when you have projects that unite all of these 3 things together. So currently in the state of New Jersey, 81% of the municipalities in New Jersey participate in the program. So that translates to 457 separate municipalities, of which 204 are certified. Now, what do I mean by certified? Well, certification comes in 3 flavors. You have bronze, silver, and gold. And you achieve these certifications by earning points by completing sustainability efforts, all of them which are on the Sustainable Jersey program website. So Moorestown first joined in 2011. They were bronze their first year, and they've been silver ever since. So good effort for them. Now, this is a picture showing most of the banners that are currently hanging in our town hall of all the different open spaces that the township is in possession of. This is not parks, this is open spaces. Now, I just want to give a little description what I mean by parks and open spaces. A park is one that the township owns and is maintained by the township, and it can include facilities such as fields, parking, restrooms, that sort of thing. Open spaces are more feral in nature. They're just areas, open areas that were purchased using open space funds, clean and green grants, donations, and the like. There's usually not too much improvements to them outside of maybe some trails, some parking areas, and some signage. So what we wanted to do, and what essentially the problem was, is the township has always been very proactive in supporting open space. They help with the funding and that sort of thing. But the problem is the township really didn't have a good handle on what it currently owned. Information on existing assets was lacking. A lot of it was in paper format. And unfortunately, we had a town hall fire, which burned it was a town hall, court, and police station to the ground in the summer of 2007. It took a lot of records with it. So we lost a lot of information. So just as Pat was talking about in his presentation, there were some people around who had been around for a long time who had a lot of stuff in their head. But that was it. All the paper stuff was gone. Now, as a result of that, public information on recreational choices was lacking. You might know where something is, but that doesn't mean that everybody else knows where that stuff is. So we decided as Sustainable Moorestown to sit down and figure out how we can address this need. And what resources do we have currently in the township that we can use to apply to this problem? Now, we've been very lucky that the township of Moorestown has a very strong volunteer spirit. In fact, we usually have more volunteers than we have open slots on our different boards and committees. So we have a very strong culture. So a couple of the groups that were instrumental in doing this was MEAC, which is the Moorestown Environmental Advisory Committee. They're charged with making sure any development in the township follows current ordinances, and stormwater has been very important these last couple of years. STEM is a private organization that was created in 1972 and helps maintain trails, raises money, and helps to acquire new open spaces. There are still some people who started STEM that are still serving on STEM today. So that's how dedicated these people We have an open space advisory committee whose job it is to work with the town council, the planning board, and the zoning board. And then Sustainable Moorestown, which is the offshoot of the Sustainable Jersey program that is the overarching umbrella for all of these things. We also have a lot of township support within the council. Doesn't matter, Republican, Democrat, year in, year out. They've been all very supportive by performing resolutions for us and also creating ordinances so we can actually get things done. And then we also have very strong supportive township departments, including Public Rec and Public Works. And we also have a very supportive county, which I'll talk a little bit about more in a little bit. So our idea, what we wanted to do, was use the power of GIS and asset management to take a inventory, just like a baseline inventory of all the information that we have within our, what I like to call the universe, which includes all of our parks and open spaces. But of course, it leads to more questions. What elements do we want to collect within this universe? What are the most important? How should we collect the data? We have a tree committee that spent some time going around with their phones, and they collected lat-long points by writing them down in a spreadsheet of all the public trees. And they measured the widths of the base of them and what type of tree it was and what condition it was in. And they had this big spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, that they then passed off to me and asked if I can put it in GIS. So I said yes. I took the lat-longs and created a nice little map for them. We needed something a little more high-tech than that in order to get this project done. Otherwise, we'd still be working on it today. And of course, we wanted to avoid project creep. We didn't want to start collecting something and then just keep going. So what we did is we put together what I think was a very strong and effective team. Sustainable Moorestown was the lead. I became the project manager. We had the MEAC committee on it, Burlington County Department of Information Technology, and they might not be on, but Marilee and Kirsten have been very supportive of us. Moorestown Town Council, and STEM. So with the exception of myself and the people from Burlington County, everybody else was a novice at this. They've never done anything like this before, but they're all very willing to learn. So what we had to do now is we had to create a plan. How are we going to go about doing this? So we broke the project down into 5 distinct phases. Phase 1 was where we're going to sit down and hash out what we're going to collect, design an actual geodatabase. Phase 2 is where we do the real hard work, where we actually have to go out and collect the information. I shouldn't say hard work. I mean, it was hard, but it was a lot of fun too. Phase 3, getting all that information in, cleaning it up. Phase 4 and 5, which kind of tie together and are technically still ongoing, is actually using the data. So let's look at these things a little bit closer. So in phase 1, the first thing we did is we had small breakout groups. And we sat down and we got some paper and we got some maps and we said, okay, we're going to collect trails and we want to know the width of the trail and we want to know what type of substrate the trail is in and how difficult it is. Brainstormed all of that, took that to the general full committee, got some comments back from them, made some changes and adjustments. But we did that by asking simple questions to ourselves. And you'll see that this is a common theme, is questions built upon questions built upon questions. So we asked ourselves, why are we doing this? If I was a private consumer or say a jogger or a resident who wants to go to a park, what information would I find important? What would I need? On the other hand, as a township professional, what information from an asset management perspective would they find useful? And if they had that information, do they actually have the ability to do anything with it? What capabilities do we have already in-house to consume the data that we'll be collecting? And finally, as Sustainable Moorestown, does this fulfill our sustainability mission? Will it help us gain points in order for us to get to the silver and gold level, which is kind of important, but not the ultimate importance? Like we've always said, we can do a project if we feel it's a useful project. If it doesn't earn us any points, oh well, we're not doing it just for the points. We're doing it to promote the town and help the town. So anybody who's familiar with GIS, which I'm sure we probably all are, knows that we're collecting information as lines, points, and areas. So essentially, we'll have 3 files at the end of the day in our geodatabase. This one here is an example of what the linear file was going to look like. We'll have trail name, a description, and then options. Because what we wanted to do is make collection as easy as possible by having drop-down menus. So, for example, you go to trail material. We have a whole bunch of different options that you can pick for what type of material. And then one of the things that was interesting was the trail difficulty. And you can see that's down there. We've got it marked as easy, moderate, or difficult. And we knocked this one around a bit. And we're like, well, do we have a numeric scale or, 1 to 10 or 1 to 5? And we're like, I don't know if anybody's going to know the difference between a 5 and a 7. Let's just do it where it's just easy. So we have 3 categories. Easy. Easy is like flat sidewalk, straight walking. Difficult is there's lots of hills and there's lots of routes and things to walk around. Moderate is everything that doesn't fit within those 2 constraints. Then we move into the point features. And this one here is just for things like picnic benches, restrooms, playgrounds, trailheads, fishing spots, that sort of thing. And even though, the best laid plans, we started doing this project and someone came to us and said, oh, well, what might be interesting? We have a lot of people that are really upset. There seems to be a lot of trash around and people don't seem to be recycling. Can we mark where our trash cans are? So we're like, oh, you know what? We didn't think of that. That's a great idea. Unfortunately, it wasn't in our programming. So we're like, okay, we can do it. And we were only maybe a week or so in the data collection. So we went back and picked these features up in the areas where we already were. But we didn't have a drop down for it. So that was actually under feature type other, and that would be a manual entry. And you'll see where that becomes a problem later on in the process. So third set of features are the polygon features, which are the actual park boundaries themselves. And these were gleaned by using the New Jersey state database and the county database for parcels. Now, they were most of the way accurate. There were some problems where we had facilities that the parcel database hadn't shown or vice versa. So there was a little cleanup for that, but that was relatively easy fix to do. And like I said, the universe of all of this was the information that was inside recreational and open space properties owned and maintained by the township. We have some county facilities. We did include those as well, but we were focused more on the actual township facilities. So then we move into the next phase where it's actually going out and getting our butts dirty and collecting information. So what we did here is we worked with Burlington County. They have a lend program where they will lend townships GPS units, and they will help in the setting up and the training of them free of charge. So we had the wonderful people down at the county help set us up between TerraSync and GPS Pathfinder, a set of menus that we can go out to use to collect our information. And of course, we had some training, like they trained a few of us, and then we went back and trained everybody else. But essentially, the experience was gained by going out and actually doing. And there were some mistakes where some people went out and they thought they were digitizing stuff, but they weren't. But since everything was so close, it was not a big deal to go out and pick up that information later. The third phase was compiling all of the data together and cleaning it up into one big geodatabase. And that mostly fell to me because I was really the only person in the township that had that experience. And this is where the trash can situation comes in, because since we didn't have a pull down menu for it, people would write in trash can, but some people would write trash can, 2 words, trash can, 1 word, garbage can, uppercase, lowercase, all different types of combinations. So it was going in and kind of standardizing that sort of thing. Another thing was the trails. We had set the GPS units to pick up a point about every 5 feet. So essentially you would take a GPS unit, start at the beginning of the trail, set it recording, and then just walk the trail. Well, sometimes people would move to the left or the right, or they would stop to look at something, or maybe they'd catch a bad satellite because they were under leaves, under trees. So you get this real jagged looking thing, like, you know, maybe somebody was GPSing with a 6-pack or something. So we had to go back in and we had to go and clean all that up. Not a big deal, just part of the normal phase of doing it. So the next 2 phases was actually taking the data and creating things that we can actually use. First, it was just analog stuff, trail kiosks, printed brochures, presentations at townwide events, static maps on websites. But our ultimate goal was to actually have these as a set of online web maps. And that, as part of phase 5, is continuing the upkeep. So we had to look at different things as how we were actually going to port this stuff out. We looked into creating a tablet and a phone app. None of us had experience in doing that. We went out and priced it. It's really expensive. The township webpage, they have a thing called GovPilot, which is kind of this pseudo GIS thing. Not very pretty. Didn't want to use that. So what we're going to actually opt with is using the ArcGIS online facilities. We also wanted to continue to upkeep this because we wanted to team up with other townships and the county to create trail connectivity and green space modeling for the region as a whole. And that would be regional interconnectivity. Plus, it's the beginning of an asset management system for the township. We had an environmental resource inventory that was done a few years back. We have GIS data for that. We have a tree database I mentioned earlier. We've currently engaged with a contractor to GPS our entire stormwater facility, so we'll have that information. And then any other data sets, we have a historic database we have. All of these can be tied together into a master GIS.
Hey, Chris, you got about 5 minutes left.
Okay. So what have we accomplished so far? We got 2,800 recreational areas. It's 1,200 acres. We've collected miles of hiking trails, multi-purpose trails, 516 individual point features. We've gone out and we've done public awareness. That's me at a booth. Sustainable Moorestown Day. And then here's a map that shows generally, of course, this looks a whole lot better, the actual full size, but it shows all of the different areas that we've GPSed and collected within the township boundaries as a whole. So one of our dreams, and this is a online beta project that we've set up, is to be able to port this stuff out so people can actually use it in the real world on their phones or on their computers. They can query the database, they can ask it questions, and just get a whole bunch of information. So this is still in the beta stage. We're still testing it. As soon as the township IT gets everything set up, we'll be able to port it online. So we're hoping that this stuff comes up probably by the beginning, I'm going to say the beginning of next year. The gears of government run slowly, so it's been taking a little bit longer than we've been wanting it to take, but that's fine. It'll all get done. It'll all get done at the end of the day. Let me just see some little scanning here. You can show results within a certain area. All right. So at the end of the day, what did we get? Well, certainly personal enrichment, because I've lived in this town for 20 years and I found things that I had never seen before. And I've talked to people that had information that I didn't know existed. It was just wonderful to be able to be a part of a project like this. Project generally ran smoothly. We had some problems with some data collection, but everybody does. Low cost, because zero is about as low cost as you can possibly get. It has an enormous potential for expansion. The biggest issue and the challenge right now is making sure that the data doesn't go stale. And this is where great asset management projects go to die, when the stuff just sits there. So there is a little prodding that we have to do and say, are you using this stuff? Are we implementing it with everything else? So hopefully they'll be doing that, and we'll certainly be on their backs to make sure that they continue to do that. So I think that's about it for me. How was I good on time?
Right on time. You guys are doing excellent with your time management. So if you want to stop sharing, Chris, and turn off your video and microphone. No new questions in the Q&A for you. But if anybody has any questions, get them into the chat or the Q&A, and we'll address those at the end. So Dave, I'm going to turn my microphone off and let you turn your stuff on and share.
All right, let me give it a try. Presentation mode here. All right, how am I looking? Good? You can see my screen?
Looks good.
That was a yes? All right, good, great. Thanks for having me. My name's Dave Wagner. I'm a GISP. I know this is a Penn State-based conference. I'm a Penn State grad a million years ago in '93. Geography degree from the Earth and Mineral Sciences College, and a Lehigh grad. I think we have some Lehigh people as well. I got an MBA from there. My contact information is on the bottom. I'm the Director of Geospatial Services for GPI. We are a kind of multidisciplinary engineering firm up and down the East Coast and some Florida as well. And I'm going to be showing you New Jersey Transit. They're a client of ours. We did a signed Trailblazer program for them. Project overview, some pretty cool maps. This is a couple of years old, but you know, we have GIS. Most of us have a GIS background here. Some pretty neat maps. The idea of this project, Trailblazer signs are the signs that when you're driving on the road, you'll see them, and they show you how to get to the train station. The focus of this project was commuter rail and light rail networks. This map on the right, I'm circling it. I think you can see my mouse moving around. You'll see there's a bunch of lines that come into essentially Newark Penn Station. There's some North Jersey lines. There's some Central Jersey lines, South Jersey lines that come into here. There's 10 of them. So their idea is a 5-year rotation. If we or the consultant or they do 2 to 3 a year, then that rotation will come around, and every 5 years, you will have somebody looking at the signs, updating them, upgrading them, putting new ones up, surveying them, installing them, and repairing them. Everyone can hear me? Everything's good so far?
Everything is great.
All good. Yeah, and we can
Excellent.
see your cursor too. So that was very nice.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Excellent. Yeah, so this is a pretty cool map that they made at New Jersey Transit, and then you can see a blown up version of that. It's a pretty nice little thing that they have. Again, more project overview. The whole point of this project is, I'm saying does New Jersey Transit have enough signage out there to guide riders to a station? You know, and I'm going to keep saying we like I'm part of transit, even though I'm not. You know, we have to get people to our rail stations. We have to have people riding the rails to support this and pay for this. It's a little bit different nowadays with COVID, obviously. But during the planning stages of making sure that they had sufficient signage was, where are the people coming from? Where are people going? And what roads are being used to get people who are driving to the train stations? So that was our job, GPI, our job in the planning stages was to figure out, where are these people coming from? Where are they going? And what roads are being used to get them to these train stations? this little map, pretty basic map, but this is showing you we did the Raritan Valley line. This is a line, a very beautiful, nice area of western New Jersey, about 15 miles from the border of Pennsylvania, that cruises along Route 22 and Route 78, gets more and more populated as you go to the east. And once you get into the Union County area right before Newark, very populated area. So this is the line that we were selected to do. And the way we broke up this work was, it's expensive to do field work. It's expensive to build the maps. At the end, they eventually wanted some nice maps. So we said the more work we can do up front by identifying these target areas, the better the project will go. So we spend about 50% of our time determining target areas. How are we going to get people from certain areas to these particular 16 stations before we go out in the field and start looking at stuff? I'll give you a little overview on that. And then we move on to the field work. And at that point, we'd be 75% done, and we need to create maps. Now, the end product is to create these people maps. Again, we were chosen to do the Raritan Valley line. I had alluded to Annandale, Lebanon, White House, all the way up to about Raritan. Pretty rural, pretty nice suburban areas, smaller stations. But then again, as you start going east, Somerville, Bridgewater, especially Westfield, Garwood, pretty populated areas. What we made, one of the things we made was this kind of straight line diagram type thing of the Raritan Valley line, where there's some of the items that people want to know. Hey, is it handicap accessible? Is there a bus route coming to it? Is there a community shuttle that will take it to us? What other light rail comes into these stations? And again, as you can see, if you know that area, and I live in this general area, is the further west you are, you have these very nice little towns without a whole lot of things going on coming into the stations. And as you go east, hey, like Netherwood, for example, has a bus route. These are the lines that come into Netherwood. All this is progressively building up until we basically get to Newark Penn Station. Once we're at Newark Penn Station, now you have all sorts of options. A lot of people use the train coming into here to go to the airport, to go to downtown Newark to work, to go to Hoboken to work or live, and or move on to Secaucus Junction, go under the river, and end up in New York Penn Station. So that's our job for the Raritan Valley line. We want to get people to these rail stations so that they can eventually get to these end spots. This map is very interesting. This is a map that we have said only a mother could love. It's not pretty. It's something that they gave to us, and we said, ooh, this isn't real good. But the content of it is amazing. What they said, as from some analysis, is we want the people that live and commute through this dark green area, we want to push them to the Raritan Valley line. Okay, a lot of analysis went into this. We don't want to overwhelm the Raritan Valley line. We don't want to overload the Gladstone Moorestown line or Northeast Corridor. So these rough borders push these people north to Gladstone, Moorestown. These borders push these people south to the Northeast Corridor. And the people in this dark green, let's get them to use these rail lines. Okay, the next map is really crazy for people that are in GIS. It makes it even more complicated. But again, this one's very helpful to us. We saw that Route 22 basically parallels the Raritan Valley line. We have Interstate 78 that kind of runs the northern border of this area. We have little purple roads in here that are big county routes, big collectors, big arterials that aren't quite US or state highways. We have 287 that kind of splits things as well. So it's interesting. They gave us all this information. We said, okay, now we have some maps. We can see what's going on. And then they really came with the big information, which was this: ridership data. They basically went out and interviewed people at these train stations and asked them, hey, how did you get here? You know, drove alone and parked, carpooled and parked, dropped off by car, walk only. What township did you come from? And what I find interesting about this is about 105 people use this station for some peak hour stuff. 86% drove alone and parked. Makes a lot of sense. People are driving and then commuting. Car pulled and parked 5%. Car dropped off 8%. Pre-COVID, you know, the fact that more people were being dropped off at the train station than were carpooling was pretty eye-opening. It helped us to kind of determine some strategies of how to build these catchment areas, which you can see on the right. This is a rough map. It's called the catchment area. What we wanted to do, if you see the bottom bigger map, was define the catchment area. So for Annandale Station, which sits right around here, what is the catchment area for Annandale? Which townships, which municipalities are sending people to Annandale, and why and how? So that's what we have over here. We have a little zoomed in area here. Again, this is the Annandale Station. We go from a gradient of dark green through the light greens, through yellow, through light orange to red. There's an outlier here, Alexandria Township, which we found interesting when we mapped this. Like, wow, that's something to pay attention to. The amount of people coming from Alexandria to Annandale were way more than any other place. So again, which station is best? We saw that line earlier. We had 16 stations along the line. We can't send we have to have it evenly distributed to make sure that people get to where they're going. Lebanon Station has 17 people. So in prime time, only 17 people use Lebanon. We thought, boy, that's really low. You have Annandale, which is the same basic area, has 105 people that use it. And you have White House Station, which has 77. Lebanon is really easy to get to. It's actually where my home office is, but it doesn't have a big parking lot. And it doesn't have a lot of amenities. When you go to Annandale, there's a few more things around it. And White House Station, the train station is in the town. So there's places you can sit down, have a coffee while you wait, maybe after work, have dinner. There's nothing in Lebanon. So we had to take all this kind of stuff into consideration, just saying, well, obviously the people coming down Route 31, we're just going to put them in the Lebanon station. It doesn't work. And I'll show you why in a minute. I'm going to show a live video. I hope this comes across cleanly. Basically, what this video is going to show you is part of our prep work. We did all this prep work. We had the numbers. We had the catchment maps. Now, instead of going out in the field and wasting money, let's look at what the field looks like from the office. So we utilize Google Maps to kind of visualize, if I'm a person getting off of one of these main highways like a Route 78, what am I going to see signage-wise? So we typed in Lebanon Station. Again, envision yourself, I'm coming off Route 78. I want to see if the signs are attributed correctly. We already had the database in hand. We know where the signs are supposed to be. Now let's see what it's like to a user. We did a little Google Maps here, surrounding areas. There's Route 78 and there's Route 22. On the left tells you how to get there. This is basic stuff that everybody does. But now I want to look at it. Before I waste time going out in the field, which costs a lot of money, I'm going to do a little recon here to see if everything I have in my database is matching up to what's actually in the field. And does it work? If I'm a driver, does this work? That's the most important thing, because we want to get people there. Granted, everybody has GPS on their phone. We found that the signs just gave people a little bit more extra security that, yep, there's a sign. Okay, I'm going the right way. So we'll zoom in. We just got off the ramp. We're driving down this Cokesbury Road. We did some fast forwarding as well. There should be a sign up ahead that tells me to go straight. Okay, yes, there it is. New Jersey Transit, great. So now I can mark that down on my database, know that it's there. We're going to go out and verify it later. There should be one up ahead that tells me to go to the left. Yep, that one looks good, a little bit leaning. Something we're going to take a look at when we go out in the field. Going through the town of Lebanon, a very nice little town. Should be one up here. It tells me to go right. Yep, that sign's there. Great. Moving along, we're going to go up the hill. This is what I was saying earlier. It kind of sits back. It's a little tucked away. Neat little place, but not the most accessible station in the world. Drive up this little road. Sometimes you drive up the road and you're confused. You think, am I going? The first time I went there, I'm like, am I going the right way? And I'll pause it, and this is it. So this is the station. You see, it's a cool little station house, an old kind of, old train building. You can't get in there. The door's locked. There's nobody in there. There's no restroom. You just had this little kind of bus shelter type thing here where you buy your ticket and you wait. Here's the parking lot. The parking lot goes a little bit further, and that's about it. So we said, okay, great. Our signs are set up that we can get the person to this station. We did a really good job there. We're going to go out and verify. But yes, yeah, we're confirming. There's really not a lot of parking here. So field work. We did all of our prep work. We're going to field. Field work was very simple. Nowadays, we have all kinds of solutions for field work. Chris showed some stuff earlier. Pen and paper, art collector, online, all kinds of cool stuff. At the time, they had this thing called Field Mapper, and we use it on an iPad. Very basic stuff, but the main thing we had to collect is, let's go out and verify the point if it's an existing sign. Let's verify the sign is there if we're going to remove it. And let's take a point and a picture of a spot where we're going to do a proposed sign, okay? And while we're there, let's get the other little basic information. We're out in the field. We're taking, the picture, taking a GPS point. We're verifying what we have in the database. We're coming off Route 78 here. It's telling us to go left. Yep, great. Sounds good. Now our field work, all we kind of did was verify instead of spending all this time driving the roads. It takes a long time to drive roads. It doesn't take as long to drive the roads. In Google Maps, you only need one person instead of two people in the field. Safety, you see he has his vest on, pulling off on the side of the road, finding a place to walk on the ramp. We took care of that ahead of time. This map is a working map. So now we're moving on to making the maps. We did our field work. We're 75% of the way done. Now we're going to make our maps. And we did this. We had 16 stations, like I told you. We did it in chunks of 2 to 3, maybe 4 at a time, where we ran through all these steps. These green lines show the client, New Jersey Transit, these are the roads we drove. These are the roads that we felt that it was important to have adequate signage to get people to the station that sits right here. Now, with unlimited funds and unlimited money, we could have driven every road all over the place, put signs everywhere, but that's not how it's going to be. We're going to do the main roads, 78, 22, county routes, US 31, 629, etc. And to make these maps, yes, we went out there, we verified. Tough to see, but there's some blue signs, these existing signs. Yep, they're there. There's signs that we're going to replace. The red triangle, yep, this one. Found it, we're going to replace it. Proposed signs, what we proposed, we worked on in the office, we verified in the field. We're going to put a sign right here, and we're going to put a sign right here. That's going to get these people coming off of this little turn to say, okay, I got to come up, I'm driving, yep, keep going straight, you're going to find it. So this is now where we start to build the actual maps that we're going to turn over and give to the client. And the client is going to give to their field crews to go out and do this work. So Annandale, for example, Annandale has signs in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different areas. So this overall map of Annandale is going to have 5 sheets that we're going to zoom into, that we're going to be able to hand over to the client. They're going to be able to keep on their desk, look at, use, hand off to their field crews and say, go do this work. Same thing here for Lebanon. Lebanon had 1, 2, 3, 4 areas where there's signs. We'll zoom in a little bit on these signs. You can see the previous slide, sheet 2, Annandale. Sheet 2, Annandale. Here's the train station. Here's an existing sign facing northbound, arrow right. So if we're traveling up Route 641, and we see the arrow going right, we make a right, and we come right to the station. We have, this one is going to be removed. It's the triangle with the red triangle. These square ones are ones that we're proposing. And let's zoom in a little bit more, and you can see here, this is what the field crews really key on and really use. So I am going out to do this, do my work. I'm a field crew person, replacing a proposed sign. On Beaver Street, 120 feet west of East Street, put in one of these signs with the left arrow. On US 22, 2,250 feet west of Petticoat Lane, put in an upper right arrow, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see how these maps were able to, from start to finish, get people to, did the research, did some field work, created maps, and now New Jersey Transit has us doing this for the lines in a 5-year rotation, 2 to 3 lines per year. Every 5 years, the lines that get, the roads that get people to their railway stations are checked, verified, and given better signage. And that is basically the end.
All right, Dave, appreciate that. If you want to stop sharing your screen, I'd like to bring our other speakers back online. You guys can unmute yourselves, bring your video back up if you'd like. I guess we have questions. Any questions from the audience, feel free to put them in the Q&A or in the chat. I did want to maybe start with one for Dave, for myself. You created a lot of maps for that project. So where is this data now housed? Is it housed with the New Jersey Transit? Who owns the data and is updating the database? And how does that occur if you're going every 3 to 5 years to check on it?
Yeah, it sits with New Jersey Transit, and it would be obviously nicer, especially with all of us here on the call, to get this in a little bit more of a modern system, right? You know, a little bit more online kind of option, which I know they're working towards, and have on some sort of handheld, or that you can access with a some kind of iPad or something similar like that. But yes, right now New Jersey Transit they like paper maps. It works for them. It's not a lot. It's not like they have hundreds of thousands of signs at state DOT. You know, they have probably 200 for each line, and they're all basically the same sign.
Right.
So they're still using paper.
Well, and paper, like we've heard before, paper can be perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, interesting. Actually, I saw the one. Well, if you're moving over to Solar's question to Patrick, actually, that's an interesting one. I have some thoughts on that if we want to move over to that one.
Yeah, let's move over to that. We have the question from Solar in the Q&A. You know, Pat, you mentioned the mandate, MUTCD, that says, you know, we have to maintain our sign retroreflectivity. And the question is, are there similar mandates for other assets that will kind of encourage these small agencies to develop and improve their asset management system? So Pat, do you have a response? Have you heard other local agencies say, yeah, we did this because, you know, we had to? Or is it something else?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a lot of the ones that we talked to that did have the sign inventory specifically mentioned the requirement. And that's one of the things we did at Pennsylvania LTAP, is when that requirement came out with the 2009 MUTCDs, we did get a lot of information. We actually had a whole class on how to go out and meet that requirement, inspect your signs and things like that. So a lot of communities, and we did offer a free spreadsheet for them to help do that and meet that. I'm a traffic engineer, so as far as other traffic control devices, there are not other mandates. I know there's been discussion. In fact, it even talks about it in the 2009 MUTCD about having a requirement for looking at pavement marking retroreflectivity, but that's never really moved forward yet. I know I saw a presentation today. They talked about federal mandates to states and to the MPOs and RPOs for maintaining roads and bridges and things like that. But I am not aware at the local level of other mandates beyond. In Pennsylvania, we do have some stormwater requirements that people have to called municipal separate storm sewer system, MS4 requirements here in Pennsylvania, that depending on which watershed you're in, that you have to meet some requirements, and a lot of communities are responding to that. So there's kind of a hodgepodge of requirements out there. I probably would not be if Dave or some Clint from the federal level, if you have some other aspects of it that could add to that, appreciate that.
I can jump on that. No, the original question has to do with signs. We've in the past done many sign collection and sign management with a lot of New Jersey counties and other states based upon retroreflectivity. And that a few years ago, that mandate has kind of kept moving, but we've done a lot of that work. And lately, the hot one seems to be the MS4 drainage stuff. We've gotten some requests, and we're doing a little bit of work for a few municipalities in New Jersey to get that done. So there are these two mandates, and there's something that we're pretty pretty skilled with, and I think it's something that people have to keep in mind because I don't know that everybody has met the requirements.
Yeah.
Well, I can guarantee you that people have definitely not met the requirements for sign in Pennsylvania, especially in rural areas, obviously. But I mean, actually, there's been a lot of other folks that have spent a lot of time in doing that. I just that there's a second part of that question. The other reason I really think that when you look at what a municipality does in basically providing all these different services out there for their residents that really affect their quality of life, I think that's kind of the big argument of an asset management system is that, well, we're providing essential services, transportation, water, sewage, all this, and we got to make sure we're using the funds that we have in the best way. And that when we do purchase something, whether it's a truck or a stop sign or rebuild a bridge, that we're taking care of that asset and maintaining it in the best possible and efficient way. And then the other big thing we saw from benefits from talking with people is just making decisions. Just like large state agencies are making decisions on millions of dollars, our local agencies here are making decisions on thousands of dollars that mean a lot. And whether they spend money on the road that goes in front of the mayor's house and repave that again, or do another road, is something that they can benefit by using asset management. It makes some more data-driven decisions as opposed to where people live. We can always joke about the mayor in Pennsylvania always has a nice paved street, but it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, and from a federal perspective, for local agencies, there's not a lot that goes down to the federal level. I mean, we saw in other presentations minimum condition of pavement on the interstates, or minimum condition of bridges in poor condition. Those are generally for the national highway system, although there, as I'm finding, depending on which state you're in, there are some states that within their borders, they may have 10 or 20 different local entities that actually own parts of the NHS and large sections of the NHS. And so those get pulled into kind of reporting on their performance through our transportation performance management measures at the federal level. And a lot of that happens through the MPOs. So the other thing I'm really interested in seeing in other states that we may be looking towards as a state duty in Pennsylvania is, we do all the inventory on all the bridges and all the roadways, and then you have all these municipalities wanting to mirror that same thing. And so those partnerships where the state helps, we're starting to help inventory traffic signals and other things that the state DOT already has kind of built this massive asset management system. And then how do they partner with those locals and make that happen? And locals are partnering up to make that happen. There's just an economy of scale there. So Pat, do you know of any economies of scale that have happened where municipalities have partnered up and said, let's make one asset management system to cover kind of multiple areas?
Yeah, that would be interesting, but with the fragmented system that we have in Pennsylvania, cooperation is often rare. We actually, years ago, there's a big push in Pennsylvania actually to get cooperative planning, just even between land use between, a borough and a township and other townships. And that happens sporadically. And to try to get them to do that would probably be pretty difficult. A lot of them do resource sharing. If somebody needs a certain, backhoe or something like that, and, Township A has it and Township B needs it, they'll share resources like that. PennDOT does have an agility program that they do share back and forth, where a local municipality may plow certain state routes and PennDOT will do some other things for them, or they may mow along state routes. So there is some of that going on. It's kind of like work activities, but as far as asset management systems, in our research, I haven't found any groups that are sharing information like that.
So Chris or Dave, anything in New Jersey where you've heard of any sharing across municipalities, or any thoughts there?
Sharing as far as, like I think Pat had mentioned, of equipment, fire departments, some police services, that sort of thing. I haven't heard any regional plans, at least in and around this area, where different townships have banded together to do plans. Unfortunately, a lot of times, if there's a neighboring township doing something, you don't usually find out about it until somebody starts clearing a lot and building it, and then that then it becomes an issue.
Yeah, agreed. I haven't heard too much sharing. That's something we were pushing years ago. We were trying to do that, especially in New Jersey, where there's, I don't know, 600 municipalities. We thought, boy, if we get someone to pool their resources, it just never really.
Okay, I see no more questions in the chat. If anybody has any, feel free to type them in. I'll give one last go around to our speakers if they have anything to say here before we close out of our session.
I'll just thank you for allowing me to present. And I think there's, isn't there an area for this conference where you can kind of like meet up with people and send notes and things? I mean, send me notes if you want to talk about anything. I'll be available.
Yeah, you can message any of our speakers just like you can any other attendee. The people tab over on the right. You can click on their name and send them a direct message and meet up. So, and all this will be recorded and available with the conference. And Corinne is taking care of that. Pat or Dave, closing thoughts?
No, I mean, same as Chris, basically. Thanks for having, and I'll be willing to answer questions or chat or whatever people need. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
All right, we're going to close this broadcast, give you a couple minutes back in your day. Thanks for attending our local asset management session. Have a good day.
Bye.